How's it going, everyone? Welcome. Javier Gonzalez here. In this video, let's take a look at the rendering logic 2, which is exploring the another layout algorithm known as positioning algorithm, and make a quick recap of how do I get here. So first thing first is, since I do really want to understand now what is CSS, so I don't need to go back to Stack Overflow or any Discord channels or asking ChatGPT and any other LLMs out there of how to center a div, of what's going on when I apply this and so on and so forth. I do want to know this for real, for once, right? One, because it is much more straightforward to understand how the things work, because you don't need, if you memorize that, it means that first, of course, you don't understand truly this, and second, that you need to go back to look at this. And to me, there is no looking back. All right. Why is that? Well, in terms of efficiency and effectiveness, particularly effectiveness, if you truly want to solve and cure your problems, you just find the way. And yes, here we are. So to make this quick recap, right? So first thing first is CSS. We look at what CSS is, right? This set of mini language that comprise into a one single language that allows to describe is the still sorry the appearance and layout of our elements in a document, in the DOM object, right? So the fundamental is that we need to know what is CSS, how to include CSS in our document, whether it's external, inline, or internal. What are the things that we can do with CSS? So like selectors, pseudo elements, and pseudo classes, and how can we define certain specific behaviors, or how can we use some CSS behaviors to define the appearance and the layout of our elements. So for example, the add rules, so media queries, keyframes, layers, view animations, which is something new, and I'm going to look at that. The other is that functions that now the language provide to you to help you to solve common problems, for example, like calc or scale, or this is the two ones that a cramp is another one. Understand what is the box model, what a box is, what is the anatomy of this box, which is made of the content, the padding, the border, and the margins, the shorthands when it comes to define each one of those elements, and last but not least is the comment. So this is the fundamentals in CSS, right? And then what is relevant in 2025, 2026, which is, hey, we need to know is what is a CSS declarations, the anatomy of that, what are the behaviors that are still relevant in CSS when you're writing your web applications. So for example, like media queries, all right? In the common pseudo selectors or selectors that still are relevant in modern web development, despite that we have a lot of these tools out there that help us to, or that avoid us to deal with the selections or any nested stuff in CSS, right? So despite that, still are relevant to know what are the common CSS selectors. So for example, via selecting elements by ID, by tag, by attributes, or the pseudo elements. So like hover, focus, why these two are still relevant. So hover is when you want to now applies a certain style to these elements. So for example, some animations, usually the focus is when you want to let the users navigate and know on which position of your website is currently at, without any pointer like technologies like mouse or any things like that. So help them with non-assisting technologies. And then the how you can select now the first element of it is the first element or the last element. The first element of it is type or the last one, right? And knowing also about the color theory, why these things is still relevant, the several color formats that we have in CSS. So the keyword useful for educational purpose, the hexadecimal, RGB, the HSL, which is now much more convenient to describe is the true color, but because the human eye doesn't work that way, there is now a new format color known as OCLA. Let me take a look at this. So OCLA, right? So on the color space, right? Exactly. This is just to describe is how do we perceive is colors. This is something that is very, very new, introduced by Bjorn Oddsson in December 2020, bro. It is a cylindrical counterpart. Holy moly. Again, this is something that is fairly new to the language. Oh, really? A part-time educator and software engineer at the game assembly. It is you? Bjorn Oddsson. These people from the north are fucking brilliant, bro. And they have a lot of time, I must say. They have a lot of time to do. Oh, yes, it is. Holy shit. When not teaching, Bjorn works as an indie game developer and consultant and creating the OCLA color space. Now, holy French those. Oh my god. So now part of the CSS standard. God damn it. All right. The game assembly, bro. Holy French toast, nigga. Oh my god. All right. Holy fuck. It's a higher vocational education in Malmö, Stockholm, Sweden, for those who wish to work in the game industry. We educate game artists, game programmers, level designers, game animators, technical artists, and procedural artists. The education is 2.5 years long. We're talking about 24, like 30, 36 months. It's because this is actually usually the amount of time that takes you to get into the wheat or to get into the fundamentals on a particular craft, or at least that's what's worked for me from complete beginner, especially here on the web development, because this journey starts from June. Seriously, this journey starts from June 2024 to understand now what React is, and then next, and then understand that I don't know what JavaScript is, so I have to dive deep into JavaScript, and then on the things that are relevant in JavaScript in terms of the web development, the current state of the web development. So for example, like synchronous JavaScript, asynchronous JavaScript, as well as functional JavaScript, functional light JavaScript. Holy moly. Except technical artists, that's 1.5 years. 2 years in a span at school, and last half year the student do their internship in the game industry. At the game assembly, the student make 8 games in total. They start out with the text adventures and the end of making FPS. Our programmers make their own game engines, holy fuck, and tools, and all the games are made in 8 to 9 weeks half time. The student always work across disciplinary and agile, which makes them very prepared when they go out on internship. Our unique selling points are we make games all the time. Our teachers are experienced in game developing and game education. We have a very good relationship with the game industry, not in Sweden. And last but not least, if you hire a person from the game assembly, that person has a large network of new and old of the game assembly student and alumni. So it is networking, it is the relationship with the industry, it is people that had experience in that industry and build stuff. Okay. That's interesting. So this highly estimated sir, right? So Bjorn Oddsson, educator and software engineer. Okay. Holy fuck! he create he create the Ogla color space, bro. Now part of the CSS standard. Imagine how much I have to pass to say, hey, you know what? I'm having this issue over and over and friend chose over that I need to create is this. I need to create is the Ogla function use Cartesian coordinate system with 3 main components: lightness, which is something that we look at the HSL, all right, to describe is the intensity of the color, which range from 0, black, and 100% of white, 0.0 and 1, the red-green axis, ranging from -0.4 to 4.4, and the blue-yellow axis, okay, from green to red and blue to yellow axis, and these values can be specified using percentage like this. So here you're specifying is now the lightness and the what is this? The lightness, the lightness, the red and green, and the blue and yellow here, or decimals like this. So if I do this, let me get into here quickly, right? From personal project to industry standard, bro. Let me laugh a little bit. That is because somebody has, imagine that you have a problem so French toast deeply that you say, hey, you know what, I'm going to have this. I'll create this. I'm gonna make this. And if somebody else wants to be part of this, good. When introduced Ogla in 2020, I never expected to reach as far as it has. In few years, Ogla has, among other things, found its way into Photoshop, now the default interpolation method for gradients, web browsers, part of the CSS Scholar level 4 and level 5, supported by major browsers, game engines, an open source library, too many to list. For Python, I recommend Color. I develop Oblag in my free time, and the results are freely available on open source. Want to support my work? Here are some options. I'm available for contracting work in color science, computer graphic, game dev, and more. I'm an indie game developer making Iceland Architect. Oh shit. A cozy town building game. Iceland Architect. Oh, holy fuck. Oh. Iceland architect. And he also passed tonight. Holy shit. Iceland architect. Holy fuck. Okay, I wasn't well aware of this. Processor Intel i5 or AMD Ryzen. 8 gigabytes memory RAM and G4 GTX this and 1 gigabyte to do this. Holy fuck. That's interesting. That's interesting. That's a very interesting. That's a very interesting. And the same for the video demo. Iceland architect. Iceland architect. Holy hell. Wish list now on Steam. Open in desktop app. That's great. Building relaxing sandbox styling city builder. Holy hell, bro. Okay, I wasn't expect to look at this. So below you find the original blog post introduction of Oakland, a perceptual color space for image processing. Turning an image grayscale while keeping the perceived lightness the same, increasing the saturation of color and all of this. Again, great for you comparing Oakland to HSV. Here's an Oakland grab color gradient with varying hue and constant highlights and chroma. Compare this to a similar plot of HSV color. HSV is this. HSV. Okay, not the kind of HSV color theory. But why is that color? Jesus. Like this. Or value here. So pretty much this is the same for HSL or that way to represent color, because at the end of the day is that representation. So the grading is quite uneven and there are clear difference in lightness and different hues. Yellow, magenta and cyan appear much lighter than red and blue. So for example here, so cyan, yellow and magenta, yellow, magenta and cyan appear much lighter than red and blue, right? But in any case, so here oh my god. Game developers actually have to deal with a lot of this physics and mathematics here. So good, so far so good, right? But that's not what I'm here. What I'm here is just to mention that this is a new color format. The reason that this exists is because unlike other color format like HSL, which is to represent true colorness, this is not how we perceive this. And at the end of the day, we are building apps is for the human eye, not for some reptilians or some sort of Anunnaki beings, right? So now is this. So again, this is just to mention this part of the color theory. I wasn't aware of that, none of that. And that's quite interesting. So yeah. So the color theory, all right. And then now the different values that we can have on the CSS. The most common one is the root elements, the M's, and the percentage. When can we use each one of them? Usually for layouts, we use is now the pixels or root M or M's, and no, but pixels. And for fonts, we use now root m's usually, or percentage, but most likely root. Why is this? Because when you want to, so when making your web app accessible by allowing the users to zoom in or zoom out or increase the font size via the settings. Let me see if I can do that. So by looking at the settings here, and here you say, hey, I do want to now make the content a little bit wide, right? The appearance, the history, use address wide. This is Brave, so it might, for example, like this, right? If I want to modify now the content, say, hey, now I want to make it very large or very large, right? And then if I navigate to this, font size very large. I don't know why it's not applying this. Custom font size, all right. But if I now open a new tab here and say, hey, Google, for some reason, the content is not very large. What if I want to zoom in and zoom out, right? Something like this. So now we preserve is the layout. As you can see, the layout is preserved, so the content doesn't actually change dramatically. Okay. But what changed is the zoom in and the zoom out here. This is why we use, for example, is root M rather than percentage. But again, I'm not sure why this doesn't work. Let's say very small, very large, page zoom here. So for example, if I do this and then I refresh here and I try to search something, the first website, okay, yeah, this doesn't work. Yeah, the font is still the same. Cycle through the most recent use, show Wayback Machine Pro on 404, pressing tab or web page, highlight as well as link, Spread Reader, automatically use Spread Reader when possible. I don't know why this doesn't work, but in any case, in Chrome browser as well, you see that actually work as intended. So in any case, right? This kind of exploration is something that is relevant, especially if you're building application and you want to understand this for real. So in any case, so the different values that we can have in CSS, as well as the different or the web fonts or the font family typography here. Hey, what is a typography? What are the different typography that we can have? So a font, sans serif and serif. So sans serif is great for readability, whereas serif is for decoration, right? You want to now provide some sort of unique web experience or unique reading experience. And the different font families, right? And the anatomy of that, which is made of several set of family by variants in font weight, like you have now light, ultra thin, thin, light, regular, bold, and heavy bold, and the variants, so whether it's italic or it's bold, right? Or regular or italic, right? And what is this italic and regular means? So regular is for content that describe things like this. Bold is when you want to show something to the user, hey, this is important. And italic is for quoting things that are outside of the language, so for foreign language, or TV series, books, or when you want to show what a character is thinking, and so on and so forth, right? So in any case, this is it, right? At least for the font family and the different alignments that we can have in fonts. So whether it is, or the different operations in typography. So alignment, line height, letter spacings, in text capitalization. So all of this is just to summarize is what are the things that are still relevant in 2025 to understand. Now, to what we really care in order to deep dive into the CSS, all right, is this. So first and first is to understand is the rendering logic. So first, in the model 1, I look at, hey, browsers by default, because back in the old days, we're talking in the 90s, none of these browsers have some sort of conventions to say, hey, this is how all of these different elements were gonna look like. Inputs, divs, sections, articles, yada, yada, right? So they come up with what they need to do, right? They do things based on what they have at that moment. So all of these browsers have these different styles and looking, feel, looking. Oh my god, the different styles and look and feel of how these elements should look like across different browsers, right? And because designers and web developers back then, they say, hey, no, we need to have some sort of blank state where all of these browsers start from. This is known as the CSS reset. Right now, this is not that popular, but back in the early 2000s, it was the bedrock of your design. So this make a reset, or AKA, is make all of these different elements in the DOM to look like the same across different browsers. So now we still have some of this CSS that is, hey, some of them are more related to layout and stuff like that. It's less like on how now they look like. It's more about layout stuff. So, but in any case, because now JavaScript engines, now CSS engines now has adopted all of this CSS spec. So now it is much more easy for us to actually develop this application without having these CSS resets. So, but in any case, as we develop our applications in CSS and provide this appearance and layouts, some of those properties now are passed down or inherits, usually the text-based properties. And because anytime that you have different or similar CSS competing with this, anytime that you define is CSS with the same specificity, and they are competing that. So in order to solve this, CSS now has some mechanism known as this cascade style. The TLDR of this is, hey, we have these different several tiers that the further you fall into that, the less likely it is for that style to be applied. So you have is the where is this defined? So for example, is if this is important, if you're using important keyword, or using transition, or just a normal declaration, okay? Then the other is in which space is this located? Is this on the application level, or the user level, or the browser? And the other is that is specificity of the selectors that is going to be applied. So hey, if this is by ID, or if this is by an attribute or a pseudo element, a pseudo class, or if this is by a tag or a pseudo element. Pseudo elements like placeholders, yeah, usually placeholders and before and after. All right, and then the order in which this appears. So if this is appear at the top, it is more likely to be applied rather than if that appear on the bottom. So this is just to summarize the cascade, right? Perhaps you don't need to know this, okay? But again, because I am serious about this CSS stuff, it is important at least to understand what the things is as you're going to write your applications, so on and so forth. Now, this is the cascade style. I also look at, because we are defining is how the content would look like. So there are different directions in how they appear, and that is the inline direction that follow is the flow of how you read the content, and the block, how all of these different paragraphs or content texts are stacked next to each other. So as the web evolved and not only show content for Western cultures, but also for Middle East and then on the Asia, so now started to become quite messy to represent different reading style. We have a particular property called writing mode, but now when you want to align certain content to match those specific, we have now a property known as the logical property, which is, hey, this is how we're going to align our content, okay? And the way how we do this alignment is based on how the content is read, okay? Not where it is, not its location. So you have now the inlines and the block for alignment with the margin and padding. And speaking of margin and padding, which is part of the anatomy of the CSS, this is how the CSS spec say, hey, all of these elements that are in the DOM, the document, if you want to represent that in media, visual media like screens or paper, all of them are be now as a box. All of these elements will be represented as box. You can also hit in CSS, represent is all the type of content, right? For example, like speech synthesizers, and so on and so forth. But for this scope, right, for this course, we only focuses on screen and print media, right? So this is why the box model makes sense here. And, well, the anatomy of the box model, which is the content, the padding, which is this fluffy things. You can think of this as when you go out and do a winter walk, that you put on a coat on that, so you can think that UR is the content, and this fluffy material is like the padding, and then the thin layer of your coat is usually made of polyester. Is now the this fluffy material of a polyester of the coat is the border, right? And then the exterior, the external or the safe space that you need, which is usually around 2 meters if you're from Canada. Yes, is this, right? Now, this is the analogy that is useful when you look at the box model, right? So we look at the padding, how you can define the padding, what is the shorthand property to do so, also the border, which is completely different of the margin, and this is the border that allows you to, well, define is also round borders. We also have another thing called the outline, which is useful for providing now navigations to assisting technology through your app, right? And the other is the margin. And the margin is similar to padding in how you set the values, but also come with some specific things like negative values, or how you can now overlap different elements in to be on the same pixel on the screen. Also, the layout algorithm that CSS used to calculate now is the position of all of these different elements known as the normal flow. And because CSS has several of this format, initially the default is the normal flow, and then as the year goes, and we have now is different way of defining layouts. All right, so for example is the position absolute, and then the flex, and the grid, and so on and so forth. Okay, but here we look at the flow or the flow layout, the normal layout. So this describe is now how these boxes, so the category of these boxes and how they behave. So you have now the block that takes all the horizontal available space. You can also now here is center elements, center block elements with a margin property known as auto. All right, and auto value is now a hungry value that allows you to now is take all the available space in one direction and the another one. Okay, these block elements you can resize this dimension. It won't line break the content, so it actually it overflow that. And another is the inline elements, where now elements, they take only the available space required. They don't make any fuss. You can line break the elements here, so you can fit that in that on the viewport. And there are other different elements like image, canvas, and videos that when you're using this layout, they now add this particularly line height, because it's treating now these elements like a text, right? Despite that these elements are technically inline elements, you can now resize its dimensions as well. And then some other things that are quite some special edge case to know about it. With image, for example, you must put all of your images close to each other because otherwise it's going to add some gap to that. The other is the line height, all right? And the other is the other box in the flow layout is, hey, this is the inline block. So you can think of like block in an inline clothing. So internally it behaves now as a inline element, but externally as a block element. So why do we need to use this? When you want to line break elements and you want to resize its dimension. So I also look at how now is these boxes dimensions are calculated, whether it's by width and height. So the TLDR of this is that width and height come with two main values: the measurement, the pixels, the percentage and root elements, and the keywords, so fit content, max content, and mean content. So with measurements like percentage, when you don't set the value of the width, it's going to now look at the patterns to determine it is width. All right, and the percentage is going to determine it is width based on its pattern contained. So now when I look at the fit content, especially the mean and the max content, is describing is that, hey, how now this elements will behave. So you have now the mean and the max. So in the mean say, hey, I'm going to take is the widest children elements, and that'll be my min width. Whereas the max content is say, hey, I'm going to take the smallest children elements of an unbroken change of content, and that'll be my max width. So if you say, for example, here, let me do this, and if I say, hey, here width, right? Okay. This won't work here. With max content or min content, right? It's a hey, it's display inline property prevents. Oh, interesting. So width, it only works on try setting display to something other than inline. Exactly. So here it's telling us, hey, we need to put this element as a block, for example, right? Because if you set that into inline, it won't take any effect. So if you put this as a block here, what it's doing is to take is the widest element, the widest children elements in an unbroken change, and that'll be is I mean, this is the min content. Exactly, the min content is say, hey, give me is the widest children elements, and that'll be my width here. So for example, here, if I set that to max content, right, it's taking now all of this in an unbreaking change, right? It's taking all the available space of the children elements in an unbreaking change. But if you say now the min content, it say, hey, give me is now the widest element here. There might be some other property. So word break, exactly. It's because applying that, exactly. So now it's taking is the widest children elements, and that'll be my max width. Yeah, we were applying some word break. That's what is doing this. But yeah, this is it, right? This is it. If you say now max content, it say, hey, I'm going to now apply, and it takes the content. So the content growth, right, way beyond that, and that'll be. Okay, so this is the difference between this min max, max content, so on and so forth. And the other is the height. So height, again, follow the same measurement units, or the measurement or the values, whether it's measurement and keyword. But here, when you use percentage, it's going to look now down the tree, because by default, it is going to be as small as possible. And it makes a lot of sense for that. So if you for some reason wants to set the 100%, what's happening is that it's going to look at the down the tree to compute is the width, the height. So if you want to now make a particular element take all the available width or all the available height in that container, all right, all the available height here. So if you create now here something like, what the hell, let me add this. So if you, for example, want to say, hey, I want to set the height, I want to do something, and say, hey, the background here will be now, right, is all of this, right? But I do want is to make the height of this 100%, all right? So you can see, because now is looking down, and somehow we have now the ability to inherit that, right? So this height, it's saying, hey, now the dimension of this element, or the height of these elements, will be is 100% of the viewport. Again, this works because we are now passing down, here is actually passing down the height, all right? It's actually now passing down the height. As you can see, it's actually passing down the height to all of these elements. So this is the reason why this work, right? So because now when you show this on mobile devices, it might be something that work not as intended, because the address bar and the footer actually takes space on the viewport. So to fix this and to avoid to make your content taller than expected in mobile devices, we have now this unit called 100 the small view height, right? That actually fix this issue. We also have the view height, but again, the small view height is something that is specific for mobile device. So with that, all right, that makes a ton of sense. Okay. Well. The TLDR of the TLDR of the height and width is that height by default is going to look down the tree to compute its values, and width up the tree, right? When you don't set any values to them. So why this is important? Because as we explore all the different layouts, way of how now the CSS arrange elements, this is something useful. So, and last but not least, I look at the margin collapse, which is a particularly property of the flow layouts that allows you to now is making elements that margins collapse side by side, right? So they can now overlap here. Because this cover a lot of rules, I just to mention is the most common one. First, you have is the margin collapse on vertical axis. All right, the bigger margin wins. Margins now push down elements, sibling elements, and among other things that to me was not that relevant right now, but it is. So this is just the model one, right? Exploring about the CSS resets, how the browsers now pass down values via the inherit specific properties, and also understand now the way how the content is arranged back in the old day and now at the current date, and how this content now is arranged or how this content is now represented via the box model that allows to describe is these elements and how they're going to look like on the screen, and now how this element is going to be rendered, right, via the layout algorithm, by default the flow layout, and what are the different type of elements or boxes that we can have there, and how they behave, and now how the layout is calculated, or how the geometry is calculated with its width and height, and the specific behavior of the margin collapse. Now in this model 2 here, all right, looking at another layout algorithm, this is the position algorithm, right? So because normal layout do everything it can to avoid different elements be on the same spot, with absolute or with positioning layout, we can now break things out of the flow and now make different elements to be on the same spot. So first we look at the relative position. So this layout mode that is enabled via the position property, and we have several alternatives, several different layouts. We have the relative, the absolute, the fixed, and the sticky. So each one of them, when you use them, enables two things: set constraint to its pattern, to its children elements, and set now or enable this additional CSS property that you can go with. So with relative, we can now go with top, right, bottom, and left, and actually move these elements out of the normal flow. With relative, the TLDR is that you can move these elements out of the normal flow, but preserving is the orderly fashion that flow layout allows to do, right? So yeah, that's the TLDR of the relative. The other is the absolute positioning. So because with relative, we can now in an orderly fashion put all these elements next to each other. All right. Here we can now pull elements out of the normal flow. And this is important for specific UI. So for example, hey, you want to show something to the user that is on top of the content, like a model or a drop down, or some elements that needs to be at the top to provide some visual effects, like a depth of car and something like that. This is when you use now this positioning, absolute positioning. So again, now it enables you this two stuff, which is set constraints to the children elements and enabling and enabling this for property, top, right, bottom, left. That makes a lot of sense. And the question is that, well, how this element is going to be positioned? What is the anchor of this element? And it turns out that this is based on the closest containing block. So by default, when you don't set any of the top properties, it's gonna follow the normal flow. So where this element is gonna put. But when you starting to use these properties, it's gonna now put, its placement, it'll be based on the the closest containing block. Why this is useful? Again, it is useful when you want to now show content on top of another one, when you want to pull elements out of the flow, right? And as we look at how to centering element in this layout mode, we look at that by adding this property, the top, right, bottom, and left, and using now is the dimensions like width and height, and using is now the margin to indicate that, hey, this box is going to now be at the center by taking all the available space in the top, in the right, in the bottom, and in the left via the margin. This is how you can now centering its elements. And you might say, is this still relevant? Yes, it is. Again, when you want to create elements out of the normal, when you want to pull elements out of the normal flow for decoration or to show something, usually banners, to sell you or make some upselling, that kind of stuff. So this is great and useful. All right. So this is now how you can center elements here. There is a property called inset property that prevents you to define all of this property, top, right, bottom, and left. And now by adding that, it allows you to take all the available space that you needed, right? In some in some more information about the containing block, again, this is something that not only exclusively for positioning elements, but for layout elements, right? Flow layout use containing blocks to figuring out is where on the screen we're going to put the element. And in the case of positioning, absolute positioning is going to look now at the closest positioning elements. I didn't know about this. Right? I didn't know about this. I thought that is what's in the closest positioning, in the closest relative position, and it is not about this. You're gonna put it on the closest related, in the closest position elements here. And some particularly game here, right? In order to determine is here, so the high score is 30%. Please again to bait it. And here is actually to now determine how well and how good you are when putting and defining all of this. By reading is the positioning absolute rules, how well you are to put all these elements and so on and so forth, right? So here, when you read about this, you say, oh, now these elements is going to take it out of the normal flow. Here, via the absolute, we're doing that. And we're saying, hey, I want to put at the top element 0 and write 0. AKA, it means that let me look at what is the closest elements here, the closest position absolute, the closest positioning elements, and that'll be my anchor. Because I don't have that, I'm going to now by default go to the root element. In any case, the viewport. And in this case, it is start from here, the top here. And I'm telling here, hey, put this element on the top, and then put these elements on the right. So, okay, we're putting these elements here, right? So far, so good. Now, you have now is different tag here. Each one of them representing is 50 pixels, just to make sure. And here you say, hey, this is the garden, and you have the tulip, bumblebee, and tree. So garden say, hey, I am going to put this is a relative element, okay? And I'm going to put it now at the top 100 and the left 100 here. So the tulip is now is breaking out of the normal flow. So the tulip here is say, hey, let me look what is my containing block, and that is the closest position layout element, in this case the garden. So that'll be here. That'll be my position, my origin, and then I'm gonna put now the top 50, which is here, right? Bumblebee say, hey, again, some similar, but in this case, I'll start here, and then I go to top 50 and left 50, right? And then you have the 3, which is, hey, again, it followed the same. I'm gonna put it here. It's a, now I'm gonna put it on the bottom, but 50 pixels. So this is 0 and this is 50. And left 125 pixels. You say 0, 50, 100, 150, 200, 250. And there you got it, right? And this is it, right? So the next one is the freeway. So you got now the freeway, which say, hey, I am putting this. So this is now an absolute. I'm breaking the flow of this element. I'm specifying is the dimension. And then I say, I'm going to put this is 0 at the top, 0 at the bottom, this position, and then I'm going to now center this element here. I'm going to take all the available space on the top and all the available space at the bottom, right? And now, because now truck, taxi, and helicopter are all inside of the freeway, okay? So this is our closest position element. Exactly. So truck now start from here and say, okay, the top will be 0. I'm going to put it here, but the left is now 50. So I'm going to put it here, right? The other is a taxi. When you say, hey, again, because it is inside of the freeway containing block, you say, hey, the top by default I'm putting on the 0, 0, top left. So top is now 50 and right is now 100. It's like we're starting from counting from here and say, hey, this is 0, 50, and 100, right? And the other is the helicopter, which is the absolute position. You say, hey, this is here, right? And here I'm saying is this is 0, so this is minus 50, this is minus 100, all right? And now let's put it on the left, 200 pixels, 0, 0, left, 50, 100, 150, and 200. And you submit, now you get that. And this is a tricky question, right? This is a tricky question. Next one is Disco Steve is having a night on the town. Position him accordingly. Again, it follows the same. Nightclub here is not a position layout. It's not a positioning element. Disco Steve has now a position is a position layout, is a positioning element. So it means that it's going to take a look at the closest element position. In this case is this, based on this small snippet. And now Disco Steve is at the bottom 0 and left 0. So start here, right? This is how it works. This another one is quite nasty, figuring out what is this. So we have all of this ring, 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 and ring, and ring. Ring is not indicated any positioning, okay? But 2 and 3, they are indeed indicated positioning elements. So 2 and 3 are positioning elements. And Dart is now a positioning element. So here we're saying, hey, this element here, it's a, hey, I am an absolute element that I need to look at my containing block that say, hey, what is the closest one? Hey, in this case, ring 4, no. Ring 3, yes, via the 3. So it means that my absolute positioning will be here, all right? This is my 0, 0. Top 40%, it means that I'm going to put these elements closely here, right? Close to the middle. And then some left 100 pixel, which is 0, 0, 50 in here. And this is what you get here. And as you can see, this is the explanation here, right? Exactly. It wins up, not coincidentally, right in the bullseye. And the other is now the help farmer John wrangle livestock. That's interesting. Again, follow the same logic here. So what is farm is now a positioning element relative. We got the coop and we got the chicken. So the coop is now positioning absolute. All right. Based on its containing block, which is the farm, and is putting that elements on the top and right, which is rightly here, and then the chicken, all right, which is now a position absolute. Again, it's going to take a look at the closest positioning element, in this case the coop, and say, hey, this is my origin, but I'm going to start from the bottom here. And since I'm using is -6 pixels, 100 pixels, I'm going to put this now right at the bottom, or right in the negative perspective here. Say, hey, let me put it this here. Right, this is 50, this is 100. The same for the peak. When you say, hey, where is peak located? Now peak is not at the cube, it's at the form. So it means that it's here. And because this is now a absolute element, it's going to look again, it is closest relative, it is closest positioning element. Peak, which is on the form, is gonna put that. This is the containing block. It say, hey, the top will be 50, and the right will be now 50. So you're gonna put it here, and then you have now the farmer, and the farmer, because it's outside of this farm class, it say, hey, I am outside of this position relative elements. What is my closest containing block? And here is the viewport, which start from 0, 0. But the farmer here is say, hey, I am the top 50 here, and on the left 50 here. As you can see, when you submit this, you get now here as expected. And the same for another here, which is the date and field. Again, something that is quite interesting, because if I remember this, is gonna put it now at the right in the middle, something like this, and you submit, you get it, right? And here is something quite interesting, because here we're not specifying is the positioning. Okay, we just telling that this element is now in a positioning layout, but we're not specifying is that. So it means that green is this containing block. Flag is gonna put it now at the relative. Okay. Absolute, which is the whole, since we are not specifying any of these CSS additional properties, is going to follow is the normal flow, right? And the ball here is going to be now say, hey, what is my containing block? Okay, my containing block here is green here. So I'm going to put now is, you might say right after the absolute, but absolute elements here, when you don't specify anything, they look like holograms. So this is why you put now on top of this. And this is a mind-bending stuff here as it is. So that is completed, right? And then when I look at the exercise here, which is absolute positioning, can be very useful when it comes to creating whimsical flourish. Let's create a bubble border here. So for example, like this. Okay, let's create a bubble border here. So you have now circle, circle, and circle. Okay. So we can say, hey, the circle class, the circle class, it'll be now is a box. We can use is the border. All right. The default, the property by default is the width, which is, you can define here like border solid. All right. Yeah, border solid. And the color, say black. I think it is. Or 2 pixels, 3 pixels. Okay, this is border. And something like this. And if you specify now some width, for example, in the case of big, this will be is now something like this, which is the width, and so the width will be here, and the height will be now 50 pixels as well, just to show something here. Yes, just to show something. I don't know why it doesn't show anything. If I refresh this, you might want to apply that. It doesn't apply anything. Oh, because circle. There you got it. Okay. It's not drawing that. Okay. So if you say, hey, circle, if this is circle big, is going to draw that. Okay. As you can see here, if I put it this, okay, if I say circle is this, and the other is because it's drawing is all of these elements is collapsing, circle big, circle medium, right? Let me put this like 25 pixels and 25 pixels, and the other is circle small, right? And this will be now 50 and 50, right? You got this. The medium will be something more like this. All right. So it'll be something more like this. What you want to draw is the big one, big circle. Yeah, the big circle, the medium circle, and the small circle, as it is, right? In order to preserve the meaningful thing, what you can do is to reshuffle them. Exactly. So reshuffle them to show them appropriately, right? So this is the order in which I do want to now show my you got it here. You need to put it B, and this small will be here. So this is the layout position. All right. So good. We already have all of these elements here. So if I now set the position layout to, if I do this, if I say position absolute, it's going to put all of its elements at the closest here. It's interesting because somehow now the box is providing this, right? The box is providing it, despite that I'm not specifying that the box is here, right? Despite that I'm not specifying that the box is here. So, but in any case, so this is the box, right? Absolute position, absolute. Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting. So somehow this has a property that it put this position. I didn't specify that, right? I didn't specify that, but it turns out that somehow somebody put that style here. All right, somebody put that style here. I don't know. Anyway, so yeah, this is how you can now put all of these elements now at the top of this edge. So what you can do here is to say, hey, now I'm going to put this element here and say top minus 50 pixels, top minus 50 pixels or minus 25 pixels to center this element. And now on the left, I want to put this onto minus 25 pixels, right? And I do want to now apply some background to make these elements render on top of this, say white, right? So now is overlapping so this element is now putting on top of another element, is drawing on top of another element via the background, okay? And then provide some border here. So border, border radius of 50%, right? You put it this, something like that, right? And that'll be quite the same for all the other elements as it is, right? So if you want to now inherit the width for this element, which is now position element, right? What you can do is, hey, give me now is the 50%, say 50% of the width and the 50% of the height, right? Make it more like this, right? What it's doing here is just to look up the pattern, and based on that determine is the width and the height, right? Because of course it doesn't look interesting. Is what I fix this to be like that. So if I say 55 pixels and 55 pixels, so things look like more fit here. So no matter is the dimension here, it will remain the same, right? If you want to now center these elements on that, I do think that looks like quite decent. All right, and we're going to repeat the same process for all the other circles here. You say, hey, this is the width and the height from the medium. The medium, it will be this one, right? I do want to put that is on the top. Here at 0, it actually lives in 0 position. But I do want it to now move down is 50 pixels down, right? Yeah, 50 pixels down. And make this, put it is on the push down the edge, or at least 50 pixels, something like this, in the middle. All right. Yeah, something like that. Yeah, something like that, right in the middle there. And then provide some border. So border radius of this element, which is 50 pixels or 50%. All right, and now set a background to draw pixels on top of this element. We say white, right? And the same will be now for the small circle that is not being rendered, we can do that, right? By saying circle small, and by saying is here this is on the, let me actually render this exactly. So to render this element here, and then what I want to do is this, right? Say circle small. Let me is now notch a little bit more, notch to the top, so the top will be now 0 pixel. I want you to remain there, right? So I don't need to specify that, but what I do need is to mention is this. The left will be is 100 pixels. Let me see is that is proper. Now still away, perhaps 75, right? Say 75 pixels. That looks adequate. Not that much. Let's say 50%, 50 pixels, 60 pixels, something like that, right? That looks like white there. Of course, the top will be is now 7 pixels here, minus 7 pixels to put this element somewhat in the middle there, as you can see, right? Let me put it now here like 9, right? Something like perhaps 10, right? Something like this. And the border radius will be now 50% of these elements, and the background that I'm going to use to overwrite or paint over the elements that I have in the background of these elements. So put it as white, and there you got it, right? I can change the dimension here a little bit to see this. Say, hey, this small will be now like 20 pixels, something like this, right? Exactly, something like this. So 20 pixels. I can push this, you can notch this here, not that much, 30, something like that, right? And to make now things much more the same, you say, hey, this will be the color for all of this. That looks quite not the same, I must say, not the same. If you say 50% and 50%, it'll be something like this. We can redust the dimension here to say 50-50 to make it a little bit more clear, and increase is the width here to say, hey, let me put it now 4, right, to match that style. So look at this. Right, I was able to make this particularly layout thanks to the position layout, right? When you want to add some sort of decorations to that. The inherit value used in this lesson is described in more detail in the built-in declarations and inheritance. The rectangle tool I'm using to measure in this video is a default screenshot tool built into Mac OS. For folk not on Mac OS, you can say Power Tools and Screenshot. I have created a treasure trove entry measuring about measuring size and distance on screen. Okay, I just come up with that by only looking that, you know. But I do think this is an image. This is not. Yeah, this is a French toast image. Exactly. let me look at the solution here.
All right, So this is one of those tricks that once you learn it, you'll find that you wind up reaching for it pretty often. Adding little decorative flourishes with absolute positioning is something that I do very often. And we're given kind of a blank canvas where we have these three elements.
Exactly. And some exercise, right? Some exercise. To understand absolute positioning, and now the exercise, which is something that you have to do, my friend, which is in my case is this one, right? So what's going to recreate is this stuff. Okay. So my solution, which is this one, my solution, and let's take a look at this.
Elements that are currently serving no purpose and have no styles. So let's start by defining a circle class. And I know that I'm going to want it to be absolute positioned, and I also know that I'm going to want it to share the same border style, right? I want it to have the same border that this rectangle does. And I could do that by just copy pasting this in here, but it's actually maybe a bit of a better idea to use the inherit value, because now whenever this parent border changes, right, maybe we want to have green borders instead, we won't have to change it in both places. This will automatically inherit whatever its parent does.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. To say, hey, let me inherit this. Inherit these values here. Okay.
I also know that I'm going to want my circles to be circles, so let's give it a border radius of 50%. And I mean, the next thing that occurs to me is the sizing. And I can't do that here because each of the circles has a different size, so let's add a new class or new selector called Big Circle. And I'm targeting kind of both the big class and the circle class. It's important not to have a space here, otherwise it'll look for children. But because I have both of these classes on the same element, it works out all right. I'm going to say width 50 pixels. And the way that I would determine this normally is I would use the max screenshot tool, and I would just kind of form a box around this. Now, I should say that for this recording I've zoomed in, so this number would be wrong. But as long as you are at zoom 100%, you'll get a reasonably good number this way. I'm just going to do it by eye since I don't have access to that tool. And I'm also not going to be super concerned about getting it perfect. Let's do maybe 65. Seems a little small. Yeah, that seems good. Okay, the next thing is positioning. And each of the circles is in a different spot, so I'm going to do that in my big circle selector as well. I'm going to say left minus 20 pixels and top minus 30 pixels. And you'll notice we have a problem, right? Like we want to constrain it based on this box, but it's not. And this goes back to what we were learning about with the containing blocks. While this element, box, is a parent to these circles, it is not the containing block because it is statically positioned. So let's add some position relative to this and make sure that we snap our circle within that box. I also see now that I need to give it a background color because I want to make sure that these circles are opaque. And with that done, we have something that looks pretty reasonable. It's really just a matter of repeating this process for the next two circles, which isn't really the most interesting task. So I'll snap my fingers and we'll see the final version with those styles. And honestly, it's not exactly pixel perfect, but it's close enough. So what I did is I went and I gave medium and small circles their own dimensions and their own distances.
And then you say, for example, here, and say 50. Yeah, it's more like artisan in this case. It's more like an artisan here. 32, 32, 30, 30. Yeah, this is when things started to be more artisan. Okay. I do think that's quite the same, right? You can think of that. Perhaps this is not that much. 45. It wants to increase a little bit. Yeah, and do something like this to nudge a little bit more. And yeah, right. Yeah, this might not look pixel perfect, right? But it's good enough here. But it's good enough here, right? Exactly, but it's good enough here. Holy moly.
All right, so this those styles. For the next two circles, which isn't really the most interesting task, so I'll snap my fingers and we'll see the final version with those styles. And honestly, it's not exactly pixel perfect, but it's close enough. So what I did is I went and I gave medium and small circles their own dimensions and their own distances.
Okay. Yeah, somewhat like that. Exactly. But this is now a trick. This is now a trick that I use a lot. This is on this exercise, and the other is a new and improved flag here. So let's suppose we're building an e-commerce app for a very fancy watch company here, which is something that a lot of them want to. We have been given the following mock-up. Below you will find that most of the cosmetic style has been applied, but it is up to you to add the new improved flag. Accepting criteria. The yellow flag should be floating above the image using absolute positioning. There should be 8 pixels between the top and the car and the flag. It should be stick out horizontally by 8 pixels. And the corner of the flag should be round 4 pixels on the left edge and 1 root element on the right edge. Right? So you got this. So what it can do here, looking at this, is to say, hey, this is an article. Okay, this article now by default is a block. Inside of this you have now a container block known as div with a particular class. The image that wrap that div. The other is the flag. And the other is the heading, and then you have now the paragraph. If we look at this, we have now the body that has this rule similar for the article. Defining is now the dimensions of this. as well as the background, box shadows, using HSL to provide now some more convenient shadow here. Then you have the flag that say, hey, I'm going to put this in this position, all right? And then the cosmetic style below, right? You have the product photo, you have the product photo.image to see, hey, this is how you're gonna look like based on this container. The other is here, and the subtitle here. So if I modify this flag here and say, hey, I want to now make this to be close to the article, the star now at the top of this article here. So what I can do is, hey, let me now set the article to be positioned in relative. All right, I don't want you to break the normal flow of this, and set the flag to the absolute. So the flag is going to look at the closest containing block, which we are telling explicitly that this is article. It's going to put these elements there, but padding won't work here. So let's do this. Say position, hey, this element will be now, I opt in to this element, a position relative element, right? Relative element, right? And now I'm opting this element to a absolute positioning. Absolute position, right? And as you can see, it say, hey, I'm putting it, but it's closest to this image here. It say, hey, so the containing elements here, it say, hey, this is flag. It say the containing elements here is the article. Well, that's interesting, because product photo, what it say is, say, I'm just the margin and the margin photo, and just displaying this element as a block. All right. So what I can do here is to say, hey, since now the article here is anchoring these elements right below the product photo, that's something. It say, hey, somehow this element has more priority on this normal flow. Okay, exactly. So this element is taking now this. So product photo here is now so product photo here is now taking precedence here. That's interesting. So if I specify now the product photo to say, hey, this is not position relative, right? All right. It is quite interesting, because I'm pulling these elements out of the flow here. Okay. These elements, I am telling that, hey, look at your closest anchor element, which is, look at the closest position element, which is this. Since I am not modifying it as position, is interesting, is following is the normal flow layout, right? So once now I specify to the flag is that property, hey, it's going to now put that on top of that. So padding here is actually affecting here to make the content to doesn't look too stretched. So top is saying, hey, I'm gonna put it here. Let me actually match the design here, and that is 8 pixels and 8 pixels. The corner of the flag should be rounded to 4, as you can see here, right? So you get now is this. So this will be now a minus pixels to put it that like a sticky table, a sticky element here. And then you put now the left to be now -4 pixels, right? To put it now here a little bit. Let me see if this actually match here. Not at all. So remove the top here. But let me put it here, not the top here as 0. Because I do want you to appear there. But is 8 pixels from the top. -8 pixels on the left, and then now on border radius here, I can say is on the border radius, it's say, hey, does it follow the same padding rules? That'll be nice. Say this one on the left and right. So you say border radius, say 25 pixels, and then you have 50 pixels. Does it work this way? Okay, all right. To say top and right, you say top right and top left. Okay, yeah, you can specify that as it is. Okay, good. So I will say is top right. Okay, so top right and top right and top left, it'll be now one root element. Say both of these are one root element and one root element, right? And on the other side, the bottom left and top left, it'll be now 4 pixels as it is, and 4 pixels as it is. It doesn't work as expected. That's interesting. It is applied that into this. Okay, it is applied now in those position, and this is applied on top left. Okay, so this is top left. It's starting from top left. Okay, it starts from top left. Okay, it started from top left, right, top left, top right, bottom right, and top left, and top and bottom left. Okay, so top left. So top left, bottom right, top left, top right, bottom right, bottom left. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. That's interesting. And this is how you apply this specific titles here. That is mind-bending stuff here. Exactly. On the article, I apply this and this as it is. Exactly. That's what it is, you know. That's what it is. That's what it is. That's what it is. Okay. Let me actually set this as it is. And there you go, right? You got all of this. So the whole point is to make this stuff here and stuff here. That's interesting. This is more relevant to the new and improved flag. right? The new and improved flag. And the other is bubble border. Mm-hmm. And the new and improved flag here. Okay. Which is this one. Oh, I get it. I do get it. I do get it. I do get it. Mm. Woo. It's stuck. Oh my god. Perhaps the video is the video right, but the audio is still recording. Encoding overload. Consider turning down video settings or using a faster encoding preset. No, it's not about that. It's that I need to recharge the battery of the Mac. Yeah, I'll give you a second. All right, and we're back. Okay, cool. The new and improved flag. Okay. Holy moly, bro. Let me put it here. This. Diggy. Right. The new and improved flag. This is something that is quality, man. Quality is pay for that, bro. Pay for you want things that are cheap, but pay for that, man. Pay for that, man. Pay for that. There is no other way around. It's like no. Get serious about. Pay for that. Oh well, anyways. So position absolute and position relative. And then here you say position absolute. Put this at the top 4 pixels here. It's not gonna work because I recognize that when things work and doesn't. Okay, you get stuck. Exactly. And on the top, on the left, we got a pixel. I think it is exactly. No, it is exactly. So put it there. And some now border radius that go from top left, top right, border left, border right, bottom right, and bottom left, like this. And exactly. But the only thing that changed was the CSS. Much later in this course, we'll learn about how the border radius algorithm works. Okay. Stacking context. This is something that is heavily talked about. Here's a question with surprisingly complex answer. How does the browser decide which elements to render on top when elements overlaps? It depends on the layout mode. In flow layouts, elements don't overlap much, but we can force it with negative margin. In this case, the DOM order matters. The pink box comes after the silver box in the DOM, so it is painted on top. There is one catch. Though in flow layout, content is painted separately from the background, check out what happens if we add some text to these boxes. So the content does not overlap, and now so the content is preserved, but the background does not. The truth is that flow layout isn't really built with layering in mind. Most of the time when we want to layer elements, we want to use position layout here. As a general rule, position elements will always render on top of non-position ones. Exactly. We can think of this as two-stage process. First, all of the non-position elements are rendering everything using flow, flexbox, and grid. Next, all of the position elements are rendering on top, relative, absolute, fixed, and stick. What if we set both elements to use relative positioning? In the case, the DOM order wins. The DOM order wins. And the C index. If we want to layer order to be different from the DOM order, we can use the C index property to manually reorder them. The C index only works with position elements. Can also be used with flex and grid children, and we'll learn more about that later. It will have no effects on elements being rendered in the flow layer. And a good way to think about this is that elements with a higher C index are placed closest to the viewer in 3D space, coming out of the screen. Hover over the iMac to view the previsualization. The default value of the C index property is auto, which is equivalent of the number of. How do you make this? I don't think this is exactly, because you make this all of these boxes, right? You make all of these boxes. But the thing here is that you wrap this into all of these different boxes, exactly. When you say out of the screen wrapper, iMac wrapper, iMac screen, and then you have now the boxes and all of these different boxes. So when I hover that, you change its position, so when I hover that, it changes its position, bro. You see, on hover, move all of these elements into this. Exactly, it changes the perspective. Look at this. Because when on hover, it changes the perspective here, you see? It changes the perspective, the elements remain the same, and what you're doing is just to animate this. And apply some colors there after the animation ends. It changes the perspective here. You barely use this property here. After that, you apply that animation, which all of these elements inherit that. That's interesting, bro. In all the different colors and inherit property, yada yada yada. And some sort of animation here. And the selection here, and look at this. Holy moly, bro. All right. So on hover, you're applying is all of this. Exactly. So on hover, you're applying all of this. Or even a focus one. And when you put now focus, It changed also the perspective, and also animated that, but I don't see any animations here. Yeah, I don't see any animation here, but you are indeed animating is that. Some basic animation here, but you are indeed animated animation or keyframe. That's very, very interesting. But in any case, so this is what it's doing here. And the stacking context. Negative C index. C index value must be integer. They're allowed to be negative. It's a valid declaration. In my experience, through negative index introduce additional complexity without offering much benefit. Every time trying to use negative index values, I won't up regretting it. As such, we won't cover them in this course. Introducing a stacking context, bro. Holy fuck. Introducing a stacking context. CSS stacking context inspector here. CSS stacking context, bro. Stacking context sidebar in the elements pane. When was the last time it was updated? Last year, goddamn. Stacking context inspector, bro. Holy moly, bro. They put now a captcha here. Lovely. Lovely. Bit Ninja server security. Interesting. Okay. Progetti. CSS stacking context inspector. Time track, land time, BG, and so on and so forth. Creato con Astro. Okay, good. Interesting. Okay, that's interesting. Okay, stacking context inspector. Okay, that go beyond the scope of today's video. That'll be all. Take care. Bye bye.